Right.
Right
Oh
on.
man, what a week this has been.
Yes.
And I have to say this is definitely not Star Wars news, but my wife and I were trying to find a way to go see Black Panther this weekend. It's not going to happen, but we have to wait till next week sometime. But oh man, I want to see Black Panther so bad, so
Yeah.
bad.
So, we don't talk enough, obviously, about Marvel. I could do this. We could welcome to the Namor chat.
Namor.
I am
Namor.
Namor. Is
He's-
that?
he's-
Oh, really? 'Cause-
So if you've seen the trailer, one of the trailers where he announces himself and says his name, the actor pronounces it as Namor, and it's like, and
Oh,
it
wow,
actually was a
that's
thing
really
across the
crazy.
webs of like indigenous peoples, like that's what this is, and it's like, oh, that's. And I don't mean to correct you, just sort of like a.
No.
This is
I
really
mean, like,
cool.
I've been reading, and I'm just saying this as the way that I grew up with it was Namor, which is because of the fact that it's Roman backward. It's like a play. It's Namor's. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to like
Go
get into the pronunciation, but so he's the Marvel's original mutant. He's like he's a fundamental character in the Marvel universe. Like, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but for anyone who's listening to this, Namor is like such a wildly important character. And just two things. I always wondered, how do you make this character real in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I mean, I was also the one who was like, when Guardians of the Galaxy was coming out, and I remember telling my wife, like, there's a talking raccoon in this, so I don't know if it's going to be good. But I'm so excited, and just as someone who is Hispanic, to see my culture represented in this way as well, and the actor, and I'll say it as the way that they say it in the movie, Namor, is that how they're pronouncing it?
Yeah.
Are they
Namor.
rolling the R at the end?
They're rolling the R. Yeah, Namor.
Man, my Uncle Herman, he works so hard to get me to roll my R's properly. Colorado. So I like that actor a lot. I know that I know sometimes it's hard when people talk about what it means to see representation on screen. But that actor said a couple of things that's really resonated with me, which is to be involved in this project, to be someone that is typically overlooked for big movies like this. I'm super excited, man. Like, so you're not able to see Black Panther this weekend? I'm imagining it seems like, because I know down here it's like packed. Is it just tickets?
No, it probably is. It was more of like a daycare, like, or finding somebody to watch our son so that we could go see it. My wife and I are actually, it's funny enough, my wife and I are actually getting a date afternoon on Saturday, which is really cool. It's friends of ours. They're the parents of our son's best friend, are going to watch Rye for a few hours on Saturday. And originally we were like, well, let's go see Black Panther. But then we realized how long that movie is. We have 4 hours. And I was like, babe, I want to see this with you, but I don't want our date to be basically you and me in a room not talking to each other for 3 hours. Like, I'm sorry, like, that doesn't sound like the kind of date time I really wanted. She's like, okay, good point. So we're gonna do food adventures instead, because that's our favorite thing in the world to do. So we'll go do that, and then we'll find some time next week to go see the movie. But yeah, I'm gonna have to wait, like, avoid all parts of the internet until mid next week until we can see this movie. I am super excited about. I've seen it. Matter of fact, Duke, it's awesome to have you here, buddy. I'll throw your comment up real quick. It's a good question. There's others who could probably answer this better than I can, but the way that I would describe it is they are, the best of my understanding is they are centering for Namor, then that character, and I believe Atlantis in the movie. They are leaning into the indigenous nature for that culture, so that it is not. So I would not say it's in. I don't believe it's indigenous Central American, but leaning into it being an indigenous population rather than white people. I mean, for the best way I can say it, rather than a bunch of white people, essentially, is what it comes.
Well, and I mean, that character in the comics is the anti-Aquaman. And I understand what Jason Momoa has brought to that character, but if you ever read like the Aquaman's a really weird comic book character. He just is a super weird comic book character. And again, I'm gonna just say it as I was growing up, but Namor, he's like a guy that you wouldn't want to like. I don't know. He'd run off with your wife. You know what I mean? Like you don't trust Namor. And he's kind of like a really interesting heel sometimes. But I think that what's clever about it is that by the way, I'm a big fan of Ryan Coogler. What he's done with the Black Panther mythos to me, like that's he's on another level. Like in the same way that James Gunn made Guardians of the Galaxy an accessible storyline, Ryan Coogler took something like Wakanda and just added all of these things to it and connected it back to traditional African culture, cultures across Africa. And I loved that. And for me to see this, like to see all that turquoise, to see all of the Aztec and Mayan influences, by the way, those are generations apart. Obviously, I liked how it's steeped in that with Atlantis.
Yeah.
I like how they're really tying that together. Yeah, no, it's really, really good.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. But why don't we get into our show tonight? Because
Yes.
not that this isn't fun stuff to talk about. I love it. But there's a lot that happened in Andor this week. I mean, there's a lot that has been happening. Let's just be honest. In this episode of Andor, though, there's a ton that has been happening. So we've got a lot to talk about, and it's probably not going to be the longest show in the world tonight, just because we're both wrapping up. We got some other stuff going on this weekend. We have a long weekend, so we're all going to try to get to the long weekend. But before we do, I'm just going to put it out there for everyone watching. If our winner from the contest, from our giveaway, our book giveaway from a couple weeks ago, is out there watching live or on Team Replay, please message me. I think I tried to email you, haven't heard back. I want to try to get this book to you, so please reach out and see if you can get in touch with us, because I'd love to get you this prize. You want a copy of Path of Deceit for High Republic Phase 2? We'd love to get you a copy of that. And so speaking of that, because we want that, and then speaking of that, if you're keeping up on it, new stuff came out for the High Republic. So new youth book came out, which is called Quest for the Hidden City. So this just released this week. Beautiful cover. And then also, this is gorgeous. This is an art book for the High Republic Phase 1. This like coffee table book. It is gorgeous. It is I don't even know how long it is. A couple hundred pages long, and it's all like sketch art as they prepped for like the High Republic comics and books and things. It's really beautifully done. So this showed up this week, which is awesome. Get your copy. It's really cool looking. And then the other one that came out is, I haven't even opened the package on it yet, or the sealing on it, but an art book for Star Wars Visions.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it came out this week. So for Star Wars Visions, if you haven't seen it, it's on Disney Plus. It's an animated series. Each episode's pretty short, but they're independent stories taking place in Star Wars, but there's a lot of relaxation of canon to make these. One of the stories in specific is this sort of like samurai Ronin type story. And they actually wrote an entire book off of it. I have it on the shelf back here. They wrote an entire book off of it. And they just started, I didn't even know they were doing this. They just started releasing a comic book based off of it that is based off that same character. And the first issue of that came out came out last month. So the next issue, I think, comes out the end of this month. So lots of really good print material for Star Wars coming out right now as well.
Yeah, to me, like I always love I'm a big fan of the cross-section books as well, but I always loved the Star Trek art books because I liked how oftentimes the storyline started with the concept art. Even though I know that there's books and there's comics and much more than just the movies, often this is a visual storytelling. And so it's so nice to put so much thought into how things look and how things work. And even, I mean, Jeff, you're building the costume. I mean, all of these things started with pen on paper.
Yes.
So yeah, I love being able to see this stuff.
It's super cool. All right, shall we jump into it for tonight? Let's do it.
Punch it.
Let's go. I messed up. I messed up.
I know it is a part of our show, and it's awesome.
There.
Yes.
I always miss one thing. There's always like one piece that I miss every
It's
time.
awesome. By the way, like Jeff is like the full producer of the show here, everyone. Like, I mean, everyone needs to understand that. Like, it's a lot of work. We have a full day job, and Jeff's actually had like a 12-hour day, and now we're doing the show. So it's like, big thanks to Jeff for always making this stuff work.
Dude, it's super fun. There's always going to be one thing I miss, but that's okay. That's part of the experience of the Kessel chat, right? But thanks everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. Live team replay. If you haven't already, do the subscribe thing. Appreciate it. We'll probably have another giveaway here soon. I'm hoping. I'm talking to a few folks that guests we've had in the past who have ways of doing like giveaways, things like that. We're just working with some friends and some mutuals we've had on the show before to see if we can do some partnerships or giveaways. So hopefully that'll happen. But we just appreciate everyone being here. And tonight we're talking about, if I can get it right down there, Andor. I called it the Great Escape or tonight's episode. I called the Great Escape for the Kessel Chat. That is not the name of the episode of Andor.
Yes.
I just thought it was kind of an encapsulation of some things that seem obvious and others that didn't seem super obvious. And obviously, okay, I should say obviously, I will throw this up first for anyone watching in either case. But
yeah,
my
we're
audio
reviewing
didn't come.
It's fine. Like we're reviewing episode 10.
There, everybody. If you haven't watched Andor episode 10 yet, please watch that first before you see this because we're going to spoil it. It's just going to be a thing. So. Just putting that out there for everybody. Okay.
Right on.
There we go. Yeah, for me, this episode, I want to put it out there and just kind of like encapsulate multiple things from the prison escape to Lonnie, the ISB agent that Luthen has is working with,
yes.
to even the scene with Mon Mothma. The reason I thought the Great Escape was, it's very obvious to think to yourself like, oh, people escape from prison. We were expecting that. Yes. But also to me, this character Lonnie from the ISB that is meeting Luthen, marks a fountain and wants to meet with Luthen and try to escape being a contributor to the rebellion while working at the ISB. And then also Mon Mothma trying to figure out this financial situation and escape from under the thumb of the Empire to help fund the rebellion, but then realizing what she's going to have to give up to do that or sacrifice to do it. It all kind of encapsulates to me this word escape. Like sometimes you can actually escape, sometimes you can't, and you have to just accept. In the prison break, and we'll get into the details because you had some great comments in the pre-show about that. In the prison break, what I loved about that was it wasn't simple, but there was a simplicity to it. They were all able to escape, and there's just water, and there's nothingness around them, and they all jump in the water, and they all start swimming away. And at the end, we just see Andor and one other person leaving, and there's searches happening for these people, but that's it, and there's an escape. But you realize that in this escape, there's nothing waiting for them. There's no civilization. Yeah. There's no town they're going to get to. It's not like if you broke out from Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay and you swam into the water and somehow made it to land, there's a city you can go hide in or go run off and try to get away from the authorities in. There's nothing on Narkina or Narkina 5 where they're at. And so it's like, okay, what are you going to do at that point? But then you contrast that with situations like with the person from the SB trying to get out and encountering Luthen, and they have a conversation, and then realizing you're not getting out of this, Lonnie. Like that's not this is not something you just get to walk away from because you don't want to do it anymore. Like and I like the dichotomy between those because it shows you that no matter what, even if there is a clear escape route and you can just jump in the water and swim away, you're giving something up. You're clearly giving something up by doing that, and you're taking a lot of risk. Just like you're stuck here. Either way, like if you tried to leave right now, and same with the Mon Mothma, if you try to do the thing you're going to do, you're confronted with a decision you have to make right now that is not going to be an enjoyable one. It just won't.
Yeah.
You've embarked on an adventure. Adventure is probably the wrong word. You've embarked on something, a journey here that is going to hurt.
What's the phrase? I walked through the door and it closed behind me. That's what I think you have in all of these characters. You have a tremendous amount of characters that are all having to trade something away to gain something. And I like the title of this episode is One Way Out. And I thought about how in prison, the one way out was for them, they're slave labor, and you know, the to rob the line from Game of Thrones, you know, the masters aren't in the graves,
Mm-hmm.
and that death was the way out, and that for all of these characters there's a clear path forward, but there's a tremendous amount of risk. Cassian can escape from prison with Kino, who's played amazingly by Andy Serkis, but what is their risk? Their lives. They are either going to escape or die trying. Mon Mothma can find the money she needs to fund the rebellion. But what's the compromise? She might move from one oppression to another. She might trade one vile gangster, Palpatine, for another vile gangster and possibly her daughter. Um, uh, uh, who that person is trying to use this system to get legitimacy. Um, what's happening with Lonnie at the end? That Lonnie wants to get out, but he can't. He's a double agent and he's stuck as a double agent. And what does he have to trade? His safety and peace of mind. And for Luthen, it's his soul. What is he trading to aid the rebellion? That line that he says at the end, where he says, "What has he sacrificed?" He says, I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them." He's willing to sacrifice 50 people so that way the Empire doesn't get wise to their activity. He's willing to use people. He's willing to kill, maim, and murder. The tools of his enemy to defeat them. And so, yeah, when I looked at that title, One Way Out, The Great Escape fits well with this because they're all trying to get to a destination, but it's like the story circle. To get something, you often have to trade something of equal value. That bit of the thing that you want, you've got to trade something away for that. It happens in almost every hero's journey, and in this story, all of the characters involved have to trade something away to get the thing that they want.
It's it feels to me like the ultimate set of compromises that all these
Yes.
characters, which is exactly what you just said. I'll use a different word, but it's exactly what you just said. What I find very interesting to kind of just to take what you just said to the next another place is it's one of these situations where in other movies or TV shows or what have you, the story leads you to believe that a king, I'll just use that trope or that stereotype, but like the king makes these decisions for the good of everybody, and you kind of don't pay attention too much to it because, yeah, the kids may not like they have to marry this particular person or whatever else, but they kind of just, okay, it's just kind of part of doing business. And they're all compromises that have to be made for certain other outcomes to occur, but you kind of don't notice it in these other stories. And I'm not saying they're good or bad. They're just, you don't always notice it in those situations because they're not blatant. They're just kind of like, oh, that's just what you have to do to get along. That's part of the world. But in this, especially this episode, each of these characters is confronted with the realization that they're forced to reckon with the fact that anything that whatever they're going to do next is going to take a compromise, and they have no choice in that, or they have no option to do a compromise. You are going to compromise, or you're going to stick with what you already have. And in the case of Mon Mothma is a great example of that. You can not compromise and not make that's fine, but you just aren't going to get the money you have, and you're going to get caught and all these types of things. But it's your choice. The compromise though is what what I forget what term she used, like thug or whatever term she used to describe the character. What that person wants is something very, very distasteful for Mon Mothma. Okay, And so you have the choice. You don't have to do it, Mon, but you know what the alternative, with Cassian, the alternative to not trying to escape at that moment is you're never leaving this place. You will never ever leave this place. For Luthen, I mean, he's already made the compromise, and he's
Yeah.
almost saying, I've made my choice, and I know what I am doing, and I'm living with it, and it has almost torn him up to the point of like not complacency, but sort of like callousness. But
Yeah.
he fully realizes what he is doing, and like you said, he is going to use the tools of his enemy. In his mind, the means or the ends justify the means 100%. And that's, to me, like the tragic nature of that character, because at some point, and we can see he's already there, like that there was a very Isildur in Mount Doom feel to that moment for me, of him standing there with his cloak not blowing in the flames in the fire, or the flames surrounding the lava, but kind of
He's
standing
dressed
there
all in dark clothing. He's
and
down
just,
in the. They're way down. They're way down in the belly of
I think
Coruscant.
level 331 or something like that. They're like
Yeah.
they're way down there, and Lonnie is staying in the elevator at a distance and kind of like almost the Elrond, like, come back, I need out, and Luthen's like, no,
No.
I'm here. Like, I came here intentionally, and I'm going to hit a button, and you're going to go back up in that elevator, and I'm still going to be here, and I am choosing this. And I find that it's heartbreaking, but it's also a realization for me that this is what's required for a rebellion to work. Like,
Yeah.
good, bad, or indifferent, no matter how you want to look at it. And it can be people can say, well, objectively, those are bad things. I'm not saying you're wrong, but rebellions aren't going to just form themselves by doing, crisp high fives and putting up flyers around the corner. Like, that's not going to. You're trying to overthrow a fascist regime that is violently fascist. You can't just be nice and hope things just work. Oh, all right, they'll step aside. That's not going to happen. Some people are going to
Yeah.
have to do what Luthen is doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's very few successful examples of nonviolent revolution. You have Gandhi's movement. You have examples like Martin Luther King Jr. You see that, and those are the rare examples. And often revolution requires people um, like Luthien, like Andor. And you're actually kind of, I think, meeting through this series all of the various types of people that are needed to make this type of, because it's, we keep hearing rebellion and resistance and all these things. What they are is revolutionaries, and revolutionaries have to often are successful by having a philosophy of by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I just want to take a moment and say something that while I was watching this show, and this is my hot take, is somewhere in this episode, this became one of my favorite Star Wars properties. It's my favorite Star Wars television show, and I love The Mandalorian, and this is my favorite Star Wars television show. Like, I this is now, and Jeff knows this, like, I'm a really big, like, Star Wars movie person. So, like, typically I start with the movies. That's like where my fandom is. um but yeah, Duke here talked about something where he's sacrificing the soldiers to not show their hand. Am I, Duke, you might know this better than me, is that Coventry? Isn't that Coventry what happened in the UK, where to not let the Nazis know that the Brits had broken their code or broken the Enigma device, that they let certain things happen, like certain bombings happen, because they couldn't let Nazi Germany know that they had broken the code. And that this is the same type of setup that is happening at the end of this episode, the sacrifice of 50
Mm-hmm.
people. It's the sacrifice of lives, is the trading of lives from one thing to the next. Yeah,
Yeah, and
this
you're
is
right. Right. I don't remember the commentary example, but like Duke just alluded to it in the chat, or the LinkedIn chat. Yes, during World War II, there the sort of mode of operations for once they had broken Enigma, and or they believed they had broken Enigma, and they believed they were reliably getting information for quite a while. They were simply like in a testing mode. Like, I'll sound kind of clinical about it. It wasn't clinical for the people who were affected by it, but they were in sort of a testing mode, for fidelity, I guess is what could say. They were testing fidelity to verify, can we accurately or close to accurately predict what is going to happen based on what we think this translation of Enigma is, so that when as they started making, they could reliably say, okay, this is really what this message means, and now we can use this information to build our offensive posture for the storming of Normandy and D-Day. You're right though, because the people that were on the other side of that, the soldiers and people who died or were compromised as a result of it, I'm sure they would not have been very happy with it. It's easy to look back on that type of thing now and say, well, that was necessary for the cause. And I'm not saying that it wasn't, but it's not it's not a binary. It's not, it's either good or bad. It's a spectrum.
Well, yeah, and you're just, this is just one of those things where, and I think you start this series with Mon Mothma thinking, I don't have to get my hands dirty. I don't have to get my hands dirty, and I can measure my risk. And this whole series is, I really think you're watching the development of two characters, Mon Mothma and Cassian Andor. And Mon Mothma's trajectory, and they're intersecting. They're obviously going to intersect. And I don't mean that just because of physicality. I mean that from a perspective of they'll both realize the same thing. They're just coming at it from different areas. Mon Mothma's got a lot to lose and a life of comfort and ease. And all she has to do is play ball, and she'll keep that life of comfort and ease, probably. And but what's the cost of that is her soul. She'll keep her life at the cost of who she is, and letting terrible things happen. Cassian, on the other hand, is someone who's like, I don't need to care about anything or anybody except the people that are directly around me. I don't need community, and I don't need to worry about anybody else. And then if I get enough money, I'll be able to take care of myself. And both of them are realizing that the Empire has built prisons around them, and that they're not in control. They don't have as much control over their lives. They don't have as much free opportunity as they can. And that whereas Mon Mothma, though, would lose her soul and possibly her life, Cassian's definitely going to lose his life, and he's already in prison. I know that we're going to try to keep tonight's episode short, so I think it might be fun, maybe, Jeff, if we take maybe three things that we each both. I mean, I think we both obviously really like this episode. I would give it an A plus. There's a 16-minute prison break. It is unbelievably good. From the start of it, the way that the action is set up, the pacing, the shots. Again, this is one of my favorite Star Wars properties. It's like up there. It's like it's nearing Empire tier levels of how much I like this. But Jeff, I think it'd be fun if maybe we each pick maybe three things that we like from this episode as a way to kind of wrap up.
I liked it. Good idea. You want to go first?
Yes, I am happy to. So I will say
grab the notes.
I've got my notes. Okay, this has been a lot of fun, by the way. This is my notes for Andor. Like, all of this is Andor. And so I love one. I'm just going to call out that one of my favorite parts of this series is Andy Serkis. That I cannot say enough how much I enjoy Andy Serkis, that he just owns his scenes. His character is just so great. But he gives a speech at the end where he says, "Wherever you are, stop your work, get up, start climbing." This is something that I honestly expected him to say. Workers of the world unite. The only thing you have to lose is your chains. This is a speech that is not just, this is, again, I love shows that are making a statement. And this show is making a very political statement about examining the lives that we lead, the institutions that we're a part of, the traditions that we follow. And I would agree, Duke, saying that the character is both flawed and brilliant. I could not agree more with that. I could not, and just how it is portrayed, how Andy Serkis brings this character. This is also the greatness of casting an amazing actor in a character role, and he's just brought like it's like, it would be like seeing someone like Denzel Washington, and like, oh yeah, Denzel Washington's going to be at the high school play or something, you know what I mean? It's like it's a high caliber actor in a small role, and it's just so great. Sorry, that's my first one. Go ahead, Jeff.
I love it. Andy Serkis has been brilliant in this. I would say in this episode, it's a combination. It's two moments, but I think they combine together really, really in a really interesting way. And it was, I'm going to do them in reverse order than how they play out in the show, but it's a contrast, and I'm still not quite sure how to put my finger on this contrast between the end of the prison break, when all the people they're out the exit, and now they can see outside again, and they can see the water, and they're going to jump off into the water. And Andy Serkis stops and says, "I can't swim," to Andor. It broke my heart because Andor is trying to talk to him like, "What? What?" You can tell he's on the verge of being like, "Here, I will help you," and somebody knocks him off, and he falls in the water, and that's it. We don't see Andy Serkis again. I contrast that moment of this almost, I made it here, but I don't get to go any further. Like, I got you here, but I don't get to go any further than this. With when they were all going up trying to get to the top of the prison and break out of the prison, and they go by a room, and someone hits a door and looks inside, and the prison guards are inside hiding. And what's interesting about me about that, when they're hiding, they're not just hiding. The one who introduces Cassian and first brings him in, who's got this very sadistic look on his face when he kind of shocks them on the floor. He's hiding in there too. They're all holding the shock sticks, but they're all hiding, and they're just like, they are afraid of what is going on and what's about to happen here. And you could see it in them. And I don't know why, but the combination of those two moments in this episode, I really enjoyed in the story, because it's a reinforcement of helplessness in the face of what you thought was such control.
Yes.
The prison guards feeling like they had such control, and it could almost be sadistic about it based off of the level of control, that when that control disappears because it really wasn't there to begin with, because it was psychological. And once the glass breaking moment occurs, and now you can't unsee what's around you. Oh crap, like, we don't actually have real control. It was an illusion that we were holding in place, and we basically forced them to believe they were in prison, but they really weren't. And then Andy Serkis, that realization at the end of like, it's all here ready for me, but I can't. It's food, I can't. Like that scene in Pan's Labyrinth when she's in the room, and they're like, "Do anything you want, get out of the room, but don't touch the food." She can't help it because there's lots of food, and by doing that, the enemy is awakened. It was the same type of thing for me here. It's like, he could do all these things, but he doesn't get to participate in what happens next. At least that's what we're led to believe by the end of this episode. I think that's probably what I hope that's where they're going to leave it with the character. Not that I don't want to see more from him, but I think it would be a beautiful and yet very tragic, almost Van Gogh sort of tragic thing to leave his character right there. To like, wow. So those two things together like one of my favorite parts of this entire episode.
Yeah, I would say I'm taking this from someone that I saw say this, and I'm also going to recognize that there's a lot of Judeo-Christian imagery that also appears there. And I don't know if I'm projecting that onto the show, but I mean, of course, like the water, them jumping into water is very like, baptism into new life. But the Moses story of Moses is a great liberator, manages the great Exodus, but then himself cannot get to the promised land, and can only see it. Is only brought to the mountaintop to see it. And I thought about that as well when in that moment, that he can't go with them. And like you, I actually kind of do hope that that's the end of that story. As much as I like that character, I'd like that story to end right there. The second thing that I really liked was and I think it's the Mon Mothma discussion, the kind of gangster, the double speak that's all happening there.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, I know a lot of people were talking about this, but the thing that I liked about it is this show again has got a lot of things to say. And one of the things that I thought a lot about was how everything in this show is about prisons, whether it is literal prisons or prisons of tradition. And literally, one of the lines is, "The old ways have value. Boundaries are liberating." And I thought how the 1984 kind of, ignorance is strength. Boundaries are limiting, are liberating. And they're doing this whole conversation with these big windows that look like bars all around them, and that the thing that they start talking about is marriage and traditions and the old ways, and how all of those things can be a option eliminator. It can be a thing that's taking away choices from you, that's taking away liberty. And so it's not just an empire or an emperor or a crazy Sith Lord that might be the thing that is causing this feeling of loss of freedom. It can be the traditions that you're born into. And I thought, wow, like, again, this show is really going for it. And I liked that line too. That's the first lie you've said. It's because Mon Mothma knows now she can't go back. She's invited this gangster into her home. That she can't go back. This is now too much of a risk. This guy knows what she's up to. She can't go back. The raw, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. It was just a great moment. That set number 2 for me. I loved that sequence.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Number 2 for me would be it's probably just jumping to the end of it, but when Luthen talks to Lonnie in the bowels of Coruscant, I loved it. Like I can't pick any one part of that interaction that I don't thoroughly enjoy, from Luthen standing farther away and you can't really see him. He's in the dark, coming closer, but still kind of everything's sort of leaned a little bit and his cloak is kind of flowing in one direction. Stellan Skarsgård is just a beautiful actor, and like that, he portrayed the emotion amazingly well. The actor who played the ISB agent, who's a double agent, like that whole interaction, there's too much to break out in that entire scene, but I will just say I absolutely loved it because it is sort of a person wanting to do good, but scared about what they have to give up to do good, and contrasted with a person who has realized exactly what they have to give up to do the thing that needs to be done, or that they believe needs to be done, and is willing to justify the means to reach that particular end, and to listen to the two of them, which is interesting because Luthen still has empathy for it. Like he still has empathy. Like he hasn't lost his empathy for people like Lonnie. He realizes what he's doing and the type of people he is doing it for. but he's also accepted that he's going to have to do horrible things for this to happen. Someone's going to have to do it, and he's accepted it's him. And I think it's a beautifully tragic moment between two different characters who are dealing with their own sort of tragedies and having to come to that realization or express the realization out loud. And I'm really glad that we finally get to see Lothan do that in this scene. So we as the audience really get to understand that exactly who he is when he does all the things that he does. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I really like that too. I really liked that speech, about what he's sacrificing. And basically, he's like, I'm what does he call it? The sunless mind. Um, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I kept thinking about, I was waiting for a Rage Against the Machine song to come on. I know that sounds so silly, but it's like there's just all of this, like it's very much the talk of revolutionaries, and so yeah, there's um you can't just dip your toe into it. You have to be fully, you have to be an extremist, I guess, to achieve the type of ends that they want.
Yeah.
The last thing that I'll bring up is, I loved all the references to Climb. Talk about a great callback to Rogue One, which is the origin of all of this. Nemec yelling "Climb," Andy Serkis yelling "Climb" as they're running through the prison to get everybody out. Climb, climb, climb. It was just it was a great callback. And then I'll just say too that the imagery of we talked earlier before a panoptica design of a prison, which is what they're in. I'm sorry, panopticon design of a prison. That a panopticon is also a societal constraint. It's panopticism is a thing where we stay in line and we follow the rules because we think that someone's watching us. And so I never realized that is the Enterprise's logo. I'm sorry, Enterprise, the Empire's logo. That the Empire, yeah, see, the Enterprise is behind me, over on this side. That the logo of the Empire is a panopticon, and that it's all built to remind you that you're being watched at all time.
Yeah.
And I liked all of that imagery, all the way through, and it just and the swimming out at the end. It's just visually. I know this. All of this is now my third point, but I'll just leave it with one of my favorite movies is Gattaca, and Vincent Freeman, who's played by Ethan Hawke, is able to show the triumph of his human spirit to his brother. Spoilers for Gattaca, by in this swim, and when they're swimming out, and this title, Jeff, there is one way out. There's one way out for Vincent in Gattaca, and that's he saves nothing for the swim back, and that is everything in that movie, and that is what is going on with those prisoners at the end. They are successful. Mon Mothma will be successful. Luthien will be successful, and of course Andor will be successful because they're ultimately going to realize that they can't save anything for the swim back. They have to just go and push on and come what may.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to put this into words for my third one. It's inside the prison. Oh, sorry. I was remembering this while you were talking. So the scene where Kino and Cassian come into the main control room and get those two guards to shut down the control systems. Specifically, the moment where they get the one guard, like, turn off all the force. He goes, no, we said shut it all down. And his response is something to the effect of, but if we do that, it's all hydro based, so it'll take months to turn back on. And they're like, we don't give a crap. Like, do it anyway. What I love about that interaction, and then what happens after that, is the two people, the sort of like the techs. They're techie people who do this job, are the systems analysts sort of thing, are kind of pulled off to the side and standing there. And even when they're not being held at gunpoint anymore and they kind of walk away, they don't move. They don't like run back and, quickly to this. It's interesting because it tells you that, or told me that they're not fanatics. They're people who believe they do a job for a particular reason, and this is the job they come to every day. But they're being they're being forced to reckon with, or to come face to face with exactly what they have been doing or enabling to be done to real human beings. And
Yeah.
I think that's also, to me, a sort of culmination point of everything we've been seeing in Andor, and the relationship between the Empire and people in this galaxy is exactly that. That the Empire, to your point, you're in a prison of like always being watched, and most people have just sort of accepted and they just kind of move on. But when they're forced to have to look at it, like someone's going to grab your head and turn and make you look at the thing that's happening next to you, um, it kind of almost reminds me of if you ever read the Hunger Games books. I forget what they call them, but they're basically somebody who gets in trouble at the Capitol and their tongue is cut out and they're no longer able to speak, but they're made into servants and they can't make eye contact and they're like hidden in the shadows and all this. It sort of reminds me of that. It's like they're almost like you're not allowed to look at them. You ignore them. They're not humans. We don't look at them. And those two people in that moment were forced to look at the people that are doing this. And in the moment, you can tell that both of them as real people are like grappling with what are we doing, but they don't know how to respond to it because this is the life they live in. This is the world. Thank you, Baconator. Avoxes. This is the world that they live in. This is the world they've grown up in. This is literally all they know. And so all that is coming crashing down right in front of them. I thought that was a beautiful scene because we see the desperation of the prisoners trying to get back to their real lives. Whether they've done horrible things to get in prison or not, it doesn't make any difference. Getting back to their lives, and two people who thought this is just what we do. God, we punch our clock with our lunch and we sit down and we do our thing at a machine and then we go home at the end of the day, realizing maybe not all of this we thought was what it was, and they don't know what to do. Like they don't know what to do with that information in that moment. To me, it was the way that that's indicated is the fact that they didn't just jump over and flip a switch and turn it all back on and hurt everybody because they're not fanatical guards. They're not stormtroopers that are bred just to do this one thing. They're just employees doing a job, but this is all they think. And it's all these tragic moments because it's not just tragedy for the sake of tragedy. It's tragic because these characters are encountering things that make them think all of this stuff, make them experience all their big feels at once, and they don't know what to do at that point. Or they do, and they do, but what they do is what you said, which is don't save anything for the swim back. I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to keep running that way as fast as I can. Or you get the people like I was describing, who stand there like, I don't know, and that's it.
Again, I think we've talked about this in the past too, where it's the oddly mundane bureaucracy that's associated with fascism, that you have to have people that allow these things to happen and allow themselves to be made into tools of it. And those people were just automatons. They're just gears in the machine that grind up humans and have them make things inside of prison labor. And the other side of it too is there's a lot of that psychology of the button pushing, where it's like, I'm disconnected from the fact that I'm causing other humans pain. I'm just pushing a button and saying, do this thing. And I don't need to even be a part of it. It's people confronted with a group of people that they have dehumanized, and they themselves are being dehumanized. It is people coming in contact with people. Yeah. That's what I mean, man. I'm telling you, this is a show, man. There's a lot that's happening here that this show is trying to talk about. It is my favorite Star Wars television. Sorry, Mandalorian. Where you were right here, and now Andor.
It's beautiful. Yeah. It is beautiful TV, and it's beautiful storytelling. It just is.
Yeah, it's art.
Oh, awesome. Well, we tried to go a little shorter than usual, but we never can. It's not possible. There's just so much to talk about these things, and it's beautiful. But everyone, thank you so much for being here. Baconator, Duke, Robert, everybody. It's fantastic having you here. We really appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. Welcome to American History 101. Yeah, no, no kidding, Duke. No kidding. That's a whole
Yeah.
other episode, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But
seriously.
thanks everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. Thanks for catching us on Team Replay if that's where you're at. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Have a good one. Bye, everybody.